After studying this module, you shall be able to know about human resource management and the various practices and programs. Learn the different types of training required in HRM. Identify which training is required for the employees. Evaluate types of practices and training effectiveness, and analyze usefulness of such practices in HRM. So what is human resource management? It is the management process of an organization's workforce or human resources. It is responsible for the attraction, selection, training, assessment and rewarding of employees, while also overseeing the organizational leadership and culture and ensuring compliance with employment and labor laws. In circumstances where employees desire and are legally authorized to hold a collective bargaining agreement, HR will also serve as the company's primary liaison with the employees' representatives. So why is the name human resource management given? Let us justify it. Human refers to the skilled workforce in an organization. Resource refers to limited availability or scarce resources. Management refers to maximize or proper utilization and make best use of limited and scarce resources. So altogether, human resource management is the process of proper and maximize utilization of available limited skilled workforce. The core purpose of the human resource management is to make efficient use of existing human resources in the organization. The best example at the present situation is a construction industry which has been facing serious shortage of skilled workforce. It is expected to triple in the next decade from the present 30%, will negatively impact the overall productivity of the sector. This is warned by the industry experts. Every organization's desire is to have skilled and competent people to make their organization more effective than that of their competitors. Humans are very important assets for the organization rather than the land, the building or other infrastructural facilities, but without employees, or let's say the humans. No activity in an organization can be done or undertaken without the human factor. Machines are meant to produce more goods with good quality, but then they get operated by the humans only. You must treat your employees with respect and dignity, because in the most automated factory in the world, you need the power of human mind. That is what brings in innovation. If you want high quality minds to work for you, then you must protect the respect and the dignity of these employees. These are the words of the great man, Mr. N.R. Narayan Murthy, the chairman of Infosys Limited. Human resource is a product of the human relations movement of the early 20th century, when researchers began documenting ways of creating business value through strategic management of the workforce. The function was initially dominated by transactional work such as payroll and benefits administration, but due to globalization, company consolidation, technological advancement and further research, HR now focuses on strategic initiatives like mergers and acquisitions, talent management, succession planning, industrial and labor diversity and inclusion. Moving on to the functions of HRM. The first function constitutes of the recruitment and selection process. Recruitment and selection is a process of an organization to increase the efficiency of the job by fulfilling the vacancies in the organization. Next is personnel administration. It is the management and regulation of employees in an organization. Third is training and development. Organizational activity aimed at bettering the performance of individuals and groups in organizational setting. Next is performance and reward management. It is the linkage between the performance and the reward system to maximize the business performance. Next is talent management. Talent management refers to the anticipation of required human capital for an organization and the planning to meet those needs. Next is succession and career planning. This is a process for identifying and developing internal people with the potential to fill key business leadership positions in the company. The next function of HRM is labor relations. Labor relations is the study and practice of managing unionized employment situations. In academia, labor relations is frequently a sub-area within industrial relations. The last function is that of HR planning. HR planning is to ensure adequate human resource to meet the strategic goals and operational plans. Let's go on to the history of HRM. Friedrich Taylor, known as the father of management, played a significant role in the development of the personnel function in the early 1900s. In his book, Shop Management, Taylor advocated the scientific selection and training of workers. He also pioneered incentive systems that rewarded workers for meeting and or exceeding performance standards. Although Taylor's focus primarily was on optimizing efficiency in the manufacturing environments, his principles actually laid down the groundwork for future HRM development. As Taylor was developing his ideas about scientific management, other pioneers were working on applying the principles of psychology to recruitment, selection and training of workers. The development of the field of industrial psychology and its application to the workforce came into actual use during World War I, as early vocational and employment related testing was used to assign military recruitments to appropriate functions. You all must be knowing about the Hawthorne studies, which were conducted in 1920s and 30s at Western Electric, which sparked an increased emphasis on the social and informal aspects of the workplace. Interpretations of the studies emphasized human relations and the link between worker satisfaction and productivity. The passage of the Wagner Act in 1935 contributed to a major increase in the number of unionized workers. In the 1940s and 50s, collective bargaining led to a tremendous increase in benefits offered to the workers. The personnel function evolved to cope with labor relations, collective bargaining, and more complex compensation and benefits environment. The human relations philosophy and labor relations were the dominant concerns of HRM in the 1940s and 1950s. HRM was revolutionized in the 1960s by passage of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and other anti-discrimination legislation, as well as presidential executive orders that required many organizations to undertake affirmative action in order to remedy past discriminatory practices. Equal employment opportunity and affirmative action mandates greatly complicated the HRM function, but also enhanced its importance in modern organizations. As discussed more fully in the later section, these responsibilities continue to comprise a major part of the HRM job. Finally, changes in labor workforce, demographies, technologies and globalization since the 1980s have had a major impact on the HRM function. These factors also are discussed in more detail as we go ahead. Moving on to the milestones in the development of human resource management. Let's talk about the era of 1890 to 1910. Frederick Taylor developed his ideas on scientific management. Taylor advocated scientific selection of workers based on qualifications and also argued for incentive-based compensation system to motivate the employees. Moving on to 1910 to 1930, many companies established departments devoted to maintaining the welfare of the employees. The discipline of industrial psychology begins to develop from here. Industrial psychology, along with the advent of World War I, leads to advancement in employee testing and selection. The next era that we are going to discuss is from 1930s to 1945. The interpretation of the Hawthorne studies begins to have an impact on management, thought and practice. Greater emphasis is placed on the social and informal aspects of the workforce affecting worker productivity. Increasing the satisfaction of the workers is cited as a means to increase their productivity. During 1945 to 1965 in the US, a tremendous surge in union membership between 1935 and 1950 leads to a greater emphasis on collective bargaining and labor relations within personnel management. Compensation and benefits administration also increase in importance as unions negotiate paid vacations, paid holidays and insurance cover. From 1965 to 1985, the civil rights movement in the US reaches its apex with passage of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, religion and national origin. In the years following the passage of the CRA, equal employment opportunity and affirmative action become key human resource management responsibilities. Now going on to 1985 to the present scenario. Three trends dramatically impact HRM. The first is the increasing diversity of the labor force in terms of age, gender, race and ethnicity. HRM concerns evolve from EEO and affirmative action to managing diversity. A second trend is the globalization of business and the accompanying technological revolution. These factors have led to dramatic changes in transportation, communication and labor markets. The third trend, which is related to the first two, is the focus of HRM as a strategic function. HRM concerns and concepts must be integrated into an overall strategic planning of the firm in order to cope with rapid change, intense competition and pressure for increased efficiency. Let's talk about selection practices in human resource management. It is very important in any corporate or human resource field to hire the correct applicant for the correct job. To acquire any job, the applicant goes through 3 stages of selection. The first stage is that of initial selection, followed by the second stage of substantive selection, and followed by the third stage, which is that of contingent selection. Now, what does the initial selection mean? It means to check if the applicant meets basic qualifications for a job, and applicants who are not meeting the basic qualifications are actually rejected. The second stage, which is the substantive selection, ensures that the most qualified among the ones who meet the basic requirement are actually filtered, and applicants who meet the basic requirements but are less qualified are rejected. The final stage, the contingent selection, makes sure that the final check before the job is offered to the applicant is done. Applicant best qualified but fail the contingent selection, that is the positive drug test, background test, etc., are rejected. Actually, the initial selection devices are the first rough cuts used to decide whether the applicant meets the basic qualification of a job. The application forms, which include the recommendations and resumes, are the very initial selection devices. E-recruiting is becoming very popular, especially among organizations with job domains compared to the companies without such domains. Organizations with job domains usually offer direct navigation in their advertising campaigns and monitor the average number of clicks it takes for job candidates. Within the initial selection, there are 2 aspects to it. One, the application form. Though application form are not reliable enough for the valid information, however, it can be good enough for the initial screen. For example, there is no point interviewing a nurse for the position if she does not have the actual education required and the required qualification. However, online application form are good enough because they can be directly reached to the person responsible for making decisions. Moving on to the background checks. Almost every employee provides some reference check on application form at some point in the hiring process. It's to check what applicant did in the past jobs and whether former employers provide useful information. Letters of recommendation are form of background checks. In the substantive selection process, if the applicant passes the initial screen next, he goes to the substantive selection methods. This is the process that includes written tests, could be performance tests and interviews. Written tests, as all of us are aware, are paper pencil tests that are most frequently used. Typically, the written tests include intelligence tests or cognitive ability tests. For example, we can talk about Raven's progressive matrices. It includes personality tests, like for example, you can use draw a person test, integrity tests like overt integrity test, and interest inventories, example Myers-Briggs type indicator. Thus, such tests have been of great help, and mechanical ability, perceptual accuracy and motor ability have proven to be very valid predictors of many skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled operative jobs in the industrial organization. Also, within the substantive tests, there are work sample tests. These are hands-on simulations of part or all of the job that must be performed by the applicants. By carefully devising work samples based on specific job tasks, management determines the knowledge, the skills and the abilities needed for each job. Work samples are widely used for hiring of skilled workers such as welders, mechanists and electricians. A more elaborate set of performance simulation tests, especially designed to evaluate a candidate's management or managerial potential, are administered in assessment centers. In these, the executives, supervisors and trained professionals and psychologists for that matter evaluate the candidates as they go through several days of exercise required for simulation. In contingent selection, when applicants are ready to pass the substantive selection methods, they are basically ready to be hired. This is contingent on the final selection. Common methods of contingent selection is a drug test. For example, a company might hire a tentative applicant contingent on his passing a drug test. So that company is ready to make an offer to the applicant as long as the person checks to be drug free. Employers might encounter this view with the arguments that the drug use and abuse are extremely costly, not only just in terms of financial resources, but also in terms of the people's security and safety. Drug tests are not cheap. If the first test turns to be positive, then the result is reanalyzed to make sure. Contrary to popular claims, the tests generally are quite accurate and the results are not easily faked. The next point that we are going to discuss is the training and development programs. Training and development is the field which is concerned with organizational activity aimed at bettering the performance of individuals and groups in organizational settings. It has been known by several names, including human resource development and learning and development. Harrison observes that the name was endlessly debated by the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development during its review of professional standards in 1999-2000. Employee development was seen as too evocative of the master-slave relationship between the employer and employee for those who refer to their employees as partners or associates to feel comfortable with. Human resource development was rejected by academics who objected to the idea that people were resources, an idea that they felt to be demeaning to the individual. Eventually, the CIPD settled upon learning and development, although that was itself not free from problems. Learning being an overgeneral and ambiguous name. Moreover, the field is still widely known by other names. Let's talk about training. This activity is both focused upon and evaluated against the job that an individual currently holds. Education. This activity focuses upon the jobs that an individual may potentially hold in the future and is evaluated against those jobs. Development. This activity focuses upon activities that the organization employing the individual or that individual is part of may partake in the future and is almost impossible to evaluate. Moving on to the types of training. Training can include everything from teaching employees to an on-job training, including basic literary skills. Technology-based learning is a form of it. The forms of training with technology are almost unlimited. A trainer also gets more of the learner's involvement than in any other environment, and the trainees have the benefit of learning at their own pace. For example, in an engineering industry, one can imagine interactive multimedia training on engineers followed by a proficiency test to see how well the employee knows the machinery. Another form of training is on-the-job training. Jumping right into work from day one can sometimes be the most effective type of training. On-the-job training gives employees motivation to start the job. Some reports indicate that people learn more efficiently if they learn hands-on rather than listening to an instructor. However, this method might not be for everyone as it could be stressful. For example, new engineering employees could work with experienced engineers. They could ask questions about way stations, proper technical ways, picking up tools or any other issues that may arise. Another very important area is that of coaching or mentoring. Coaching mentoring gives employees a chance to receive training one-on-one from an experienced professional. This usually takes place after another more formal process has taken place to expand on what the trainees have already learned. Coaching or mentoring gives trainees the chance to ask questions and to receive thorough and honest answers, something that they might not receive in a classroom with a group of people. For example, again, let's talk about the engineers who could gain valuable knowledge from more experienced engineers using this method. Lectures usually take place in a classroom format. It seems the only advantage to a lecture is the ability to get a huge amount of information to a lot of people in a short amount of time. It has been said to be the least effective of all training methods. In many cases, lectures contain no form of interaction from the trainer to the trainee, and it can be quite boring. Studies show that people only retain 20% of what they have been taught through a lecture. For example, engineers who receive lectures on issues such as company policies and safety stand to gain a little. Moving on to the next method, which is that of technical skills. Technical skills focus on teaching individuals new technology and providing them with essential updates of technology and structural designs. Technical training also has become important because of the changing designs in an organization. Again, I will take the example of the engineers who could be taught about the machinery system and usage. Another very important form is that of interpersonal skills. All employees belong to the work unit and their work performance depends on some degree of their ability to effectively interact with co-workers and their boss. Some employees have excellent personal skills, but others require training. Like for example, engineers can be taught the ways of interacting with customers and consumers both. Now let us summarize it. Human resource management is the process of recruitment, selection of employee, providing proper orientation and induction, providing proper training and developing of skills, assessment of employee, performance appraisal that is, providing proper compensation and benefits, motivating, maintaining proper relations with labor and with trade unions, maintaining employees' safety, welfare and health by complying with labor laws of concerned state or country, whatever it is. For any organization to function effectively, it must have resource of men, which is the human resource, money, material and machinery. The resources by themselves cannot fulfill the objective of any organization. The need to be collected, coordinated and utilized through human resources is always there. And the effective management of human resources is also very vital. Hence, human resource management, or HRM as we say, has emerged as a major function in organizations. Human resource management is the organizational function that deals with issues related to the people such as compensation, hiring, performance management, organizational development, safety, wellness benefits, employee motivation, communication, administration and training. Every applicant for job requirement passes through the 3 stages of selection, and only if one level is cleared will the individual reach the next level. Most training programs work rather well with majority of people who undergo training and learn more than those who do not. The success of training also depends upon the individual. If they are not motivated enough to learn from the training sessions, then they are not going to actually benefit out of it. Some people actually participate in training programs just because they have to be a part of it or they are getting some kind of certificate out of it. Training climate is also important when the applicant sees that opportunity is good enough and that there are enough resources, they feel motivated to work.